Hello viewers, welcome to the next video in the tutorial series of Yii framework. In this video, we are going to discuss about active records. So, in the last two tutorials, we have discussed about database access object, which is one way of accessing the database. Next, we have discussed about the query builder, right? Now, in this video, we are going to discuss about active records. So moving ahead, okay, first let's understand what is an active record. So active record is an object-oriented interface for accessing and manipulating the data that is stored within the database. Next, active record is associated to a database table. So right now we have a table called TBL client, right? So here we would create an active record for this particular table. So I have created an active record called client corresponding to the client table. So this is the table name for this active record. Okay. Next, the instance of an active record is mapped to a row in the table. So right now, like we have this row in the table, right? So we would have an active record instance mapped to this row. Next, the attribute of an instance represent value of the column. What does this mean is, so let's say right now we have client active record, right, and I am accessing the attribute name. So now the value of the name corresponding to that instance would be equal to the value of this column. Okay, so now let's look into the example of the active record. Before looking into the example, let's see how we can create the active record using code generation tool of Yii framework. So here I would say GII. Okay, then we would go to model generator. Here we would select the table name, so TBL client. Then here you would provide the full qualified name for the active record. Sorry, you would not provide the full name, you would just provide the name without the namespace. So it would be client. Okay, so this is the namespace for the models, the base class from which the model would extend, so which is EDB active record. Then what is the database connection ID for this active record? So it is DB. Okay, do you want to use the table prefix or not? So you can select that option over here. Okay, next is the generate relations. I would not go into the depth of it right now because I would discuss about it when we discuss about relations in active record. Okay, so if you click on preview, right, it is saying that please generate this model, right? So here I have generated the client active record using the same approach, and also I have generated the project one as well for tbl underscore project table. Now in the client active record, this is the table name function which would return the table name. So tbl underscore client would be written from here. Then we have the rules function. Now in the database, if you see, if I see the structure for this table, all these three columns are not null: name, email and status. So in the rules they are set as required. Okay, then the length for these three columns are 64, 128 and 32, right? So this is the string validator. So if you input the name which is greater than 64, I mean in length is greater than 64, right, you would get a validation error. So this is how you would configure the rules within the active record. Okay, next is the attribute labels. So you are just providing the labels corresponding to the attribute, and these labels would be shown in the form fields actually. Okay, forget about it right now. This is the relation actually which we have created between client and project table, right? So I would discuss about it when we discuss about the relations in the active record. Okay, moving ahead, I have created a controller called record controller over here, right? And we are going to follow the same approach what we did for query builder, where we compare the queries with the database access object queries, right? So we are following the same approach over here. We are going to compare with database access object queries and then see how we have to write them using active records. So in the query controller, the first function we have is action all, and we are using the query all function to fetch the data from the fetch all the records from the database. So how do we do that using active record? So here, so this is your model. You are calling the find function. So this would return an instance of the active record, and then you are calling the all function on top of it, right? So it would just return you all the records in the database. Then we are iterating on the records, and we are printing the name and the email of for each of the record. So now let's look at the output on the browser. So here I would say record slash all. So the first record name is Harry Potter and email is abc@gmail.com. Similarly for other records, name and email. So this is about the all function. Right now let's do some variation in it. So the first one is order by. So by default the records are ordered by ID, which is the primary key. Now I would do order by, then you pass the params. So I would say name only, right? And now let's look at the output on the browser. So see, so Harry Potter and next is PJ, right? So this is ascending. Now if we change it to descending and let's refresh the browser, so this is refreshed. So we have first as SJ, next one is Ruffy, then PJ, and then Harry Potter. Okay, next one is index by. So by default the records are indexed by the numeric keys, right? So if we actually print the records, print exit, and then we are saying dollar records over here, so they are indexed by these numeric keys. Now if I do index by name, see, so now they are indexed by name. Next is find all. Okay, so find all, how to use it? So basically we would say find all, and then you have to pass the condition over here. So I'm passing the condition in hash format. Sorry, this would be status. So status active. Okay, so it would return us all the records with the status as active. Let's look at the output on the browser. So we have 3 records because in the database we have 3 records with status as active. Okay, so moving ahead, okay, limit and offset. So here we would say find, then limit to, so we have 4 records right now. So we would say limit to and then saying all. So it should return us first 2 records only. So Harry Potter and Ruffy. Now we would provide the offset over here. So we would say offset. So right, by default offset is 0, right? So I'm just providing it 1 now. So now Harry Potter should not be there. It should start from Rafi. So Rafi and SJ. So this is how you are going to use limit and offset. Then as array. This is actually very important as array because if you want to return the result set in an array format, right, then you have to use this function and it would considerably improve the performance. So how we have to use it? We just have to say as array and then all function. So let's look at the output on the browser. Now it would break actually because we are right now accessing it as an object, but now we are converting the result set to array. So if we refresh the browser, we would get the error over here. Let's change it. So if I change it to name and then email, so we have got the results over here. Okay, so this is how you can use as array. Okay, moving ahead, let's talk about one. So in query controller, we are calling query one, right? So in when we are using active records, we have to use the one function. So client find, now you have to pass the where condition over here. So where id equal to 1 and then we are calling the one function. So now let's see the output on the browser. Okay, so 1. So Harry Potter abc@gmail.com. Okay, you can get the same result using another function which is called find one. So you just say client colon colon find one and then you would pass the id, the primary key over here. Now let's look at the output. So same result. So this is how you can use the find one function. Okay, moving ahead, the column function. So in query controller, we have this query column. So here in active record, we have the column function. So this would print the this would give us the first column in the result set. So if we print the records, so I would say column. So it would give me 1, 2, 24 and 25, which are the primary keys. Okay, moving ahead, let's talk about scalar. So it would return us first row and first column. So value should be 1. So now let's check the output on the browser. Okay, so record scalar. So the value is 1. Okay, moving ahead. Okay, in active records, we have one more function called count. Right, so here we are saying client find count. So right now the number of records that we have are 4, right? So we should get the output as 4. Okay, so here I would say count. So we have the value as 4. Okay, moving ahead, let's talk about joins. So the first one which we are going to discuss is inner join. So here what we are doing, we are selecting TBL client star and then from project table to which we are doing the inner join, we are getting the name of it as project name, and this is the where condition, this is the on clause actually. So and then you are calling the all function on it. So if we here we iterate over the records, right, and then we are printing the name and the email. Now let's look at the output on the browser. So here we say join. Okay, so we have got the name and email. Okay, one key point here is in the select clause we have p.name as project name, but we cannot print it over here. The reason being we are returning here the record of client. right? So we cannot directly access dollar record and the project name. If we have to print the project name as well, then what you have to do, simply add this function here as array and then all, and then here we say record name, here email, and then your project name. So I would just copy this, paste it over here. So project name. Okay, refresh the screen. So we have the project name over here. We are getting the two records. The reason being, in the project table we have only two records and they are mapped to the client ID 1 and 2. So we are just getting two records in the result set. Moving ahead, let's talk about left join. So here what we are doing, left join, pass the table name to which we are doing the join and then the on clause, right? Now in the left join, what would happen is we would get all the results from the left table and then get the matched data from the right table as well. But if there is no match in the right table, then we would get those values as null. So here we would get all the four records, right? But we have only two records in the project table, right? So what we would get the null values for the remaining two records in the client table from the project one. So now let's look at the output on the browser. So I would say left one join. Okay, so Harry Potter abc at gmail.com test one. Similarly for Rafi, we get the project name, but for the remaining two records, we got the project name as null. So moving ahead, let's talk about right join. So here the opposite of the left join. So we get all the records from the right table, right, and the matched records from the left table. But if there is no match, then we would get the value as null from the left table. So here what we are doing, we are joining with project table and then the on clause. So here p dot client id equal to tbl underscore client dot id, right? And then we are doing the same thing as array and all and then printing the data. So now let's look at the output on the browser. So right join, so we have got the two records. Now I would make a small change. In the project table we have client id as 1 and 2, right? So in the client table I would just change it to 5, right? So here for client id 2 we have no map data in the client table. So now let's look at the output on the browser. So we are not getting any name and email, we are only getting the project name. So this is how you can use joins using active records. Okay, so what we have learned in this tutorial, we have discussed about all function, one function, column function, scalar function, count function, the inner join, left join, and the right join functions, right? Now let's talk about the transactions, how we can use the transactions in active record. So here what we are doing, we are getting the db for this active record and then we are beginning the transaction on it. And here what we are doing, we are inserting two new records and then we are committing the transaction. So as soon as we execute this statement, the commit is set to off in the database. Now let's say if I comment this statement and I execute this method. So if I say test transaction, okay, and if I see it in the database. No new records are added. The reason being we have commented this statement. Now let's uncomment this and now execute it on the browser. Okay, now refresh the database. So we have got two new records over here, and we can see that actually on the browser as well. We have query/index. So we have got these two new records. One more point. So let's say this record is inserted successfully, but this one fails. So what would happen? The flow would enter into this catch block and the transaction would be rolled back and no record would be inserted into the database. So this is how you can use the transactions using active record. So that's all for this tutorial. I hope this tutorial is useful to you. There is actually much more stuff related to active records which I want to share, but that would be covered as part of successive tutorials. In case you have any questions, you can post them in the comment section or you can drop us an email at info@ushainformatic.com. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more such videos. Thank you very much for watching this video.